Have you ever truly listened, really listened to how wise older people speak? There's something unmistakably special in their words measured calm and deeply intentional. They don't just speak differently, they think differently. And that difference becomes most obvious in the phrases they don't say. Recent studies have revealed something fascinating. Intelligent older adults tend to avoid using certain common expressions, phrases that may seem harmless or familiar to most people. But once you understand the true meaning behind them, you'll see exactly why people with life experience and deep wisdom often choose silence over speaking those words aloud. In this video, we're going to explore 5 everyday phrases that wise older adults almost never say. Not because they're trying to sound smart or appear above others, but because their life experiences and their personal growth have led them to a calmer, deeper way of living. But this isn't just about language. It's about perspective. Every phrase we choose not to say is like a window into our mindset. It reveals how we deal with challenges, how we carry ourselves with dignity, and how we navigate life's quiet, often unseen battles. What's truly remarkable is that the wisdom behind these choices aligns beautifully with ancient Stoic philosophy, which teaches us that peace and clarity don't come from what's happening around us, but from the strength we cultivate within. If you're over the age of 60, if you've reached a point where you reflect more than you react, then this message is for you. Because staying mentally sharp isn't just about training your memory or reading more books. It's also about learning how to speak with wisdom. Words don't just communicate information, they reflect the depth of your soul, the richness of your experiences, and the strength of your spirit. And sometimes just by letting go of a few familiar phrases, you open a door that leads to greater peace, greater confidence, and a kind of quiet respect from others that no one can take away. So let's begin with the first phrase that wise elders tend to avoid. That's just how I am. At first glance, it might seem like a statement of self-awareness or even self-acceptance. But more often than not, it carries a subtle tone of surrender. It's a clever way to avoid change, to sidestep the effort of growth. Seasoned, thoughtful older adults don't treat aging as a reason to stop evolving. They see it as an opportunity to keep learning, to keep growing, and to adapt with grace and integrity. When someone says, "That's just how I am," what they're really doing is closing a door to personal improvement, to deeper relationships, and to a richer understanding of themselves. From a Stoic point of view, human beings are never fixed. Our thoughts, our character, our habits, they are all within our power to shape. Every day is a new opportunity to become a better version of ourselves. And the truly wise understand this. They rarely say, "That's just how I am." Instead, they choose to say, "I'm still learning," or "I'm working on it," because those small changes in language reflect something much deeper, a mind that is still alive, a heart that is still open, and a soul that is still growing. According to Stoic philosophy, we become the result of the choices we repeat daily. So when someone says, "That's just how I've always been," it's like handing away their power. It suggests they can no longer change, that the best of who they could become is already behind them. But those who truly understand life, whether they're 70, 80, or beyond, believe the opposite. There's always room for growth, no matter your age. Let me tell you a true story. Henry, a retired math teacher, now in his 70s, used to get frustrated easily, especially when people didn't understand what he was explaining. For years, he'd say to his wife and kids, "That's just how I am. I'm a perfectionist." It sounded like self-awareness, but in truth, it was a shield, a way to avoid change. Over time, he began noticing something painful. The younger ones in the family had stopped coming to him for help with schoolwork. The grandchildren he loved so much were starting to keep their distance, afraid of his sharp tone whenever they struggled to understand. One evening during a quiet dinner where no one made eye contact or said much at all, something inside Henry stirred. He asked himself, what's more important, being right or being close? Would I rather be known for my accuracy or remembered for my warmth? That moment changed everything. From that day forward, Henry began to shift. He started speaking more gently, listening more patiently, and holding back the urge to interrupt or correct. He asked more questions. He made room for mistakes. And gradually the warmth returned to the dinner table, as if someone had turned the light back on after a long time in the dark. You see, true wisdom in old age doesn't come from being rigid or set in your ways. It comes from being flexible in a thoughtful way, holding on to your core values, but still willing to adjust in the name of connection and growth. Some people think that saying, "that's just how I am," is a sign of strength. But real strength lies in saying, "I can change, I can do better." Strength doesn't need to be loud. It shows itself in the quiet commitment to keep moving forward, to keep growing. And that right there is what separates a life that's stuck in place from a life that's still evolving, still shining in its own beautiful way. So the next time you catch yourself about to say, "that's just the way I am," stop. Ask yourself, is this helping me grow, or am I just clinging to comfort? Because truly wise elders choose growth over ego. They choose change over pride, and they choose connection over control every time. There are certain phrases that sound light as air, but carry a heavy weight in the heart. One of those is, "it's too late now." It slips out quietly like a sigh, but behind it is often a sense of resignation, as if the best parts of life have already passed and there's nothing ahead worth looking forward to. But if you listen carefully to the truly wise among us, you'll notice something. They rarely say that, not because they have never felt fear or regret, but because they understand a truth that Stoic philosophers have emphasized for thousands of years. As long as we're breathing, we're not done. To say it's too late is to place a period where there should only be a comma. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." It wasn't a message of despair, it was a call to urgency, a reminder that time is precious and that the possibility of change never disappears. Even if your hands are marked with age spots or your back no longer stands as straight as it once did, that doesn't mean the road ahead is closed. Ask yourself, how many inspiring stories have you heard about people starting something new at 70, finding love at 80, picking up a paintbrush, learning to sing, or writing a memoir at 90? The mistake isn't starting late. The mistake is believing your life has an expiration date. Let me tell you the story of Ruth, an 81-year-old woman living in Ohio. For most of her life, she was a dedicated mother and wife, nurturing her home, raising her children, and living a quiet, simple life. After her husband passed away, she sank into sadness and began telling herself, "My life is over. It's too late to travel, too late to learn anything new, too late to feel excited about anything ever again." Then one morning, while cleaning out her closet, she came across an old camera, dusty, long forgotten, tucked behind boxes of holiday decorations. And suddenly she remembered a dream she had in her 20s to become a photojournalist, capturing real-life moments from the world around her. That very afternoon, she walked to the nearby park and began taking simple photos of aging trees, cracks in the sidewalk, catching sunlight, sparrows resting at the edge of the pond. 1 year later, she joined a local photo exhibition. 2 years later, she sold her first print. And today, she teaches photography to other seniors every Thursday at her local community center. Ruth didn't say, "it's too late." She chose to say, "why not now?" Sometimes the most powerful transformation comes from one small shift in mindset, from resignation to curiosity, from despair to possibility. And that's the true beauty of wise aging. Growing older doesn't mean trying to be 25 again. That's not the point. What really matters is that you recognize the value of your time, your life story, and the unique abilities you still carry, whether your hair is gray or your steps are slower. The Stoics never believed in wasted years. They didn't look back on the past with regret. They believed in the strength of the present moment, in what you can still do right here and now, no matter what you've been through. You see, the phrase, "it's too late," is really just fear disguised as calm acceptance. It's a way to hide from the things that make us uncomfortable while pretending those things are out of reach. But real wisdom, the kind that's been shaped over years of living, doesn't shrink from fear. It looks fear straight in the eye and says, "I'm still here. And while I'm here, I can still do something that matters." So next time that little voice inside whispers, "it's too late for me," respond like a Stoic. Not with words, but with action, with grace, with quiet defiance that says, "watch what I'm still capable of." And if you're still watching this video right now and these words have resonated with you, that's your sign. You're still open. You're still curious. You are still growing. So don't hesitate to leave a comment with the number 2 below to let me know you're still here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. Your support is what allows us to keep creating meaningful, inspiring content for this community. Now let's continue the journey with the third phrase that wise elders avoid: I can't change. On the surface, it may sound like self-acceptance, but more often than not, it's a quiet surrender. It's drawing a line not because change is impossible, but because someone has stopped believing in their ability to grow. But those with deeper insight, especially those grounded in Stoic thinking, don't say that. Not because they believe change is easy, but because they understand something essential: change is always possible. As long as you have the courage to look inward and the humility to keep learning, you can evolve. The Stoics believe that true strength doesn't come from controlling the world around us, but from controlling how we respond to it. The philosopher Epictetus once said something simple yet powerful: it's not what happens to you that makes you suffer, it's how you react to it. And our reactions, our attitudes, our behaviors, our choices. Whether you're 70, 80, or older, those choices still belong to you. When you say I can't change, you're handing over your power. But when you say I choose the person I want to become, you're taking it all back. Let's be honest, change isn't easy. It asks you to abandon old habits, to let go of what's familiar, and to take emotional risks. But in facing those challenges, you rediscover something vital: your energy, your purpose, your trust in yourself. Yes, it's true, the older we get, the more deeply our patterns become ingrained. Ways of thinking and reacting shaped over decades can start to feel automatic, like second nature. But does that mean change is impossible? Absolutely not. It simply means that change requires more intention. And the beautiful thing is, age gives us more intention than ever before. I once knew a man named Walter. He's 78 now. For most of his life, Walter was known as someone with a short fuse. He'd interrupt people mid-sentence, snap at telemarketers, and get irritated over little things like how a neighbor trimmed their hedges a few inches too short. And whenever someone brought it up, he'd just say, "That's just how I've always been." But then something happened that completely shifted his perspective. One day, during a random outburst, he startled his grandson Dylan, just 8 years old. The boy flinched and stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. That one look stopped Walter in his tracks, like someone had shaken him awake after a long sleep. He didn't want to be remembered by his grandson as the angry old man. He didn't want to be the reason people felt they had to walk on eggshells. So Walter began to change. He started reading about mindfulness. He offered real apologies for the first time in his life to people he had hurt. He practiced pausing before speaking. He took deep breaths. And most importantly, he began to listen more than he reacted. It wasn't easy. It didn't happen overnight. But his family noticed. His neighbors noticed. And most importantly, Walter noticed. He realized that he had never been trapped in his old self. He had simply never believed a better version of him could exist until he gave it a try. The phrase "I can't change" is like locking a door that was never really closed. It limits you. It excuses you from responsibility. And even worse, it quietly turns your back on one of life's greatest gifts: the ability to keep growing even until the very end. Wise elders understand this. They don't view personal growth as something reserved for the young. They know that the older you get, the more meaningful, more honest, and more powerful change becomes. By the time you've reached this stage in life, you've experienced enough loss to understand the value of peace. You've made enough mistakes to truly appreciate self-awareness. You've said goodbye to enough loved ones to know that the best time to become the person you were meant to be is not tomorrow, but today. So if that thought ever crosses your mind, "I can't change," remember this. That isn't a truth. It's just a passing feeling. And feelings, just like the weather, can shift. No matter how strong they are, they always pass. But the person you choose to become, even now in this chapter of your life, is still entirely up to you. There's no such thing as too late when it comes to becoming a better version of yourself. All it takes is the courage to begin. Now let's move on to the fourth phrase that wise older adults tend to avoid: I deserve more than this. At first, this may sound like a statement of self-respect or even self-worth. But when it's spoken with bitterness, resentment, or a sense of being wronged, it takes on a very different tone. It shifts from self-honoring to self-victimizing. Instead of taking ownership and rising above circumstances, this phrase pushes responsibility outward, as if everything that happens lies outside your control. And that's exactly why truly wise elders, especially those guided by Stoic thinking, almost never use it. The Stoic philosophy teaches that while we can't control everything life throws at us, we can always control how we respond. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, who carried the weight of an empire and endured profound personal loss, once wrote, "Welcome whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny. For what could more aptly fit your needs? That doesn't mean you should tolerate abuse or accept suffering blindly. It's simply a gentle reminder. If you view life only through the lens of what's fair or unfair, you will begin to lose touch with your inner strength, your core resilience." The truth is, when someone says, "I deserve more than this," what they're often really expressing is pain. Maybe it came after a disappointing marriage, a career that didn't turn out as hoped, a dream that never came to life despite years of effort. That kind of heartbreak is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged. But wise elders don't anchor their self-worth to outcomes. They look back and ask themselves, how did I live? How much did I give? How hard did I try? They carry forward the lessons, not just the wounds. They don't tie their self-respect to money, recognition, or comfort. They build their dignity on what they've endured and overcome, not on what they've lost. I think of Larry, an 81-year-old man with bright eyes and a deep, thoughtful voice. He spent a lifetime building a small business from the ground up. At 70, with full trust and hope, he handed it over to his son. But within a few short years, everything collapsed. The company failed, his savings vanished, and the reputation he had protected for decades became a topic of quiet gossip in the small town where he lived. It felt like a free fall. He was swept into a storm of disappointment, sadness, and quiet resentment. "I gave my whole life to that," Larry said, his voice cracking. "And this is what I get in return." Have you ever truly listened to how wise older adults speak? There's something deeply special in their words, measured, calm, and intentional. It's not just the way they speak that sets them apart, but the way they think. And that difference often becomes most visible through the things they don't say. Recent studies have uncovered an interesting truth. Intelligent seniors tend to avoid certain common phrases, words that may sound harmless, even familiar. But once you understand what they truly imply, it becomes clear why those with life experience choose silence over uttering them. In this video, we're going to explore 5 phrases that wise elders almost never use. Not because they're trying to sound superior or enlightened, but because life and inner growth has shown them a more thoughtful, peaceful path. This isn't just about speech, it's about perspective. Every word spoken or left unspoken reflects the state of the mind, how a person meets challenges, maintains dignity, and quietly overcomes life's trials. Interestingly, many of these choices align closely with ancient Stoic philosophy, which teaches us that peace and clarity don't come from what happens outside, but from the strength we cultivate within. If you're in your 60s or beyond an age where reflection begins to outweigh reaction, this video is for you. Because keeping the mind sharp isn't only about memory exercises or reading more. It's also about learning to speak with wisdom. Words aren't just tools for communication. They're reflections of the soul of life, experience, of strength earned. Sometimes simply removing a few habitual phrases can open new doors to feeling more empowered, more grounded, and more naturally respected by others. Let's begin with the first phrase that wise elders tend to avoid. "That's just how I am." At first, this might sound like self-awareness, even self-acceptance. But more often than not, it's a quiet surrender. It's a subtle way of avoiding growth, of dodging the discomfort of self-examination. Experienced elders don't see aging as an excuse to stop evolving. Instead, they see it as a unique opportunity to keep learning, to adapt gracefully, and to meet change with dignity. When someone says, "That's just how I am," they're often closing a door to self-improvement, deeper connection, and richer self-understanding. In the spirit of Stoic philosophy, human beings are not fixed. Our minds, personalities, and habits, these are all things within our power to shape. Every day is a chance to become a better version of ourselves. And wise people know this. They rarely say, "That's just how I am." Instead, they say, "I'm still learning," or "I'm working on it." Because those subtle changes in language are powerful signs of a mind that's still alive, open, and moving forward with quiet strength. According to Stoic teachings, who we are is the result of the choices we make every single day. So when someone says, "That's just the way I am," they're essentially giving up their agency. The phrase implies that change is impossible when in truth, growth is always within reach. The wisest among us, those in their 70s, 80s, or even 90s, believe the opposite, that there's always room to grow no matter your age. Let me share a true story with you. Let me tell you the story of Carol, a retired school teacher now 78 years old. For most of her life, she would often say, "I'm just not a people person." Because of that belief, she avoided social gatherings, rarely engaged in long conversations, and mostly chose to spend time alone. She said it so many times that the people around her started to believe it was true. Then one day, after a hospital stay due to health issues, she was prescribed a long period of rest. And during those quiet, solitary days, Carol came to a realization: too much silence isn't peace, it's loneliness. For the first time in her life, she realized just how many opportunities to connect she had missed. She didn't want to live that way anymore. So instead of saying, "I don't like crowds," she tried something small. She joined a local book club at the library that met just once a month. And surprisingly, she started to share. She didn't speak a lot, but when she did, her stories held people's attention. Carol didn't turn into a social butterfly, but she did open up, soften, and grow in her own quiet, meaningful way. Change didn't make her someone else. It made her more whole. Those who age with wisdom understand that habits aren't chains. They're simply patterns we've repeated for too long. And if we choose, we can absolutely begin writing a new chapter. The phrase, "That's just how I am," is like closing the book of your life before reaching the final chapters. But you know what? It's often those final chapters that hold the richest moments, the lessons that linger, the values we pass on, and the legacy we leave for future generations. There's a quiet danger hidden in that phrase. There's something subtle but risky about saying, "That's just how I am." It's when that phrase becomes an excuse to cover impatience, rudeness, laziness, or even emotional indifference toward others. In reality, many people have used that phrase to avoid responsibility for hurtful behavior, almost as if to say, "I can't change, so you'll just have to accept it." But those who've lived long, especially those who live with awareness and deep wisdom, know that maturity doesn't require perfection. It requires accountability. If you've hurt someone, you can apologize. If you've missed out on chances, you still have time to show up and do the right thing. Who you were yesterday doesn't have to be who you are tomorrow. The moment you dare to step beyond the boundary of "this is just who I am," you open the door to a new path forward. So instead of repeating, "That's just how I am," try saying, "I used to be that way, but I'm open to becoming better." That small shift in language can open up something much bigger, a door that leads to a stronger, kinder, more grounded version of yourself. Stoic philosophy reminds us of this simple truth: seek the door that opens to character growth. Don't remain locked in the old room of habit. Standing your ground can be a form of strength, but choosing to grow for the better, that is the mark of true wisdom. And that is the difference between simply growing older and truly growing up. The next phrase, "I deserve more than this," also needs to be approached with care, because the moment we start thinking that way, our mindset begins to shift from gratitude to entitlement. And that's exactly what wise elders often try to avoid. Understanding your worth is a good thing, but when we live with the expectation that life should treat us a certain way, it becomes dangerously easy to slip into bitterness, sorrow, and emotional rigidity. Stoic philosophy teaches this. We don't control rewards. We don't control how others treat us. And we certainly can't force the world to repay us for everything we've done. The one thing you do control is how you choose to respond to whatever life brings your way. Life isn't a contract where you give more and automatically receive more in return. Life is a gift, and the more you expect it to repay you, the more likely you are to be disappointed. I'm reminded of Paul, a retired entrepreneur now in his 80s. For over 40 years, he poured his heart and soul into building a successful business from the ground up. Naturally, he hoped that his children would carry on the legacy, but they simply weren't interested, and that hit him hard. "I thought I deserved more appreciation." After all those years, Paul would often say, his eyes clouded with quiet disappointment. But as reasonable as that feeling might seem, that very mindset was unknowingly creating distance between him and his family. The more he clung to the belief that others owed him something, the more hurt he felt when reality didn't meet his expectations. That silent sense of resentment, though unspoken, was present in his gaze, in his quiet sighs, and in the way he carried himself. Gradually, dinners became shorter, phone calls less frequent, hugs more rare. Then one day, after a deep conversation with an old friend, someone who had known him since his early days in business, Paul began to see things differently. He paused and asked himself, instead of expecting more from others, what can I give today? That single shift in perspective opened an entirely new door, a door to reconnection. Instead of pushing his children to take over the company, he started sharing the stories behind it. The lessons, the failures, the quiet victories, and most importantly, the unconditional love he'd always had for them. His children didn't respond with obedience. They responded with warmth. Not out of duty, but from a place of genuine affection. When you live with the mindset of "I deserve more," everything becomes a transaction. You start keeping score. Who got what? Who owes what you've lost. In your mind, there's always a running tally, and that tally quietly drains your joy. But when you choose to live from a place of openness and generosity, everything begins to shift. You start to feel lighter. You start noticing what's good. You begin to receive happiness without needing to demand it. The Stoic sages like Marcus Aurelius never expected life to be fair. They didn't ask, why do I have to suffer through this? They asked themselves, in any circumstance, how can I live with integrity? And it was that very question that led them to true inner freedom. A kind of freedom not dependent on outcomes, approval, or external rewards. Wise elders don't live this way because they have given up or resigned themselves to life. They live this way because they've moved beyond the need to prove or demand. They've arrived at a place of quiet contentment. The phrase "I deserve more than this" is a subtle trap. It shifts your emotional balance into the hands of others, your family, society, or even your younger self. But those who have lived deeply know this truth. Peace doesn't come from fairness. It comes from how you choose to see everything. From realizing that even the smallest thing you have today might already be a gift. And sometimes gratitude is the highest form of wisdom. A gentle reminder as we close this video. If any part of this message touched something in your heart, please leave a comment below. And if you wish to keep growing even as your hair grays or your steps slow, click, subscribe, and walk this path with us. Aging is not the end. It's the beginning of living more truthfully as yourself. And every choice you make, even now, can still be the first step toward the most meaningful chapter of your life. If you've stayed with us until this final moment, it means you've given yourself the space to reflect, and that in itself is something truly precious. If today's reflections spoke to you, leave a comment with the number 6 below, so I know you're still here, still listening. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I invite you to click subscribe and turn on the bell. Your support fuels our mission to share meaningful, heartfelt content with this community. Now, some final thoughts just for you. At a certain point in life, often after age 70, the question shifts. It's no longer what should I do next, but becomes how can I live fully with what I already have? And on that journey, the words we choose to speak carry more weight than ever. Not just because others hear them, but because we hear them too. That's why wise, seasoned elders choose to stay away from the negative phrases we explored in this video. Not to appear wise, but because after years of living, loving, falling, and rising, they've learned this simple truth. Peace comes from how you interpret life, and your words can be the key, either unlocking freedom or keeping you stuck. A Stoic elder is not cold or detached. On the contrary, they are deeply compassionate, fiercely loving. But they've learned how to hold things gently, to let go, to keep the heart soft even in the face of hardship. That's why they don't say, "It's too late." They say, "I'm still learning." They don't complain. "No one listens to me." They choose to listen more deeply. They don't cling to the thought life isn't fair. They focus on what they still have the power to influence. That is true strength. Quiet, grounded, unshakable. So remember this. Your words shape your days. Your days shape your spirit. And your spirit, that light inside you, is what guides you through the final chapters of life. Choose words that build, not break. That soften, not harden. That bring hope, not doubt. Not just to show the world who you are, but to nourish the person you're still becoming. Because the truth is, as long as you're breathing, as long as you're alive, something beautiful still lies ahead. We would love to hear from you. What did you learn today, and how will you apply it in your life? Your reflections are a gift to us. Every comment, every story you share fuels us to keep creating meaningful, inspiring content for this community. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone you love. Thank you for walking this path with us. We'll see you in the next video where we'll continue learning, growing, and living a life of greater depth together.